Here we go for the September 2023 webinar. Our presenter, David Whiters, is a person with more than 3 decades of sustained recovery. He has worked in the addiction recovery movement since 2001, and he is a member of CARE's 45 cohort. David, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, everyone, for having me. Thank you, Elvin, for that awesome introduction. I'm going to share my screen, and then I won't be able to see you guys. I'm only going to be able to see the presentation. Is that correct?
I think so. Sometimes it'll show up on the side. There's a way to do that. Let's see what happens.
Let's do this. Share. Oh, I don't want to share that. My bad. Share screen. No. Let me do it this way. I'm going to go here. Go here, right? Entire screen. This ain't that complicated, y'all.
It was working earlier. That's the way it is with all this technology stuff. Do I need to share it, David?
You shouldn't need to. You shouldn't have to.
Okay.
Yeah, why don't you share it, George, because I'm not for sure what I'm not doing right. Let me try one more time. Share screen.
Oh, I'm sharing now, so let me stop that.
Okay. Yeah, I think that might be it. We can only share one at a time.
So you're pressing the share screen button down there at the bottom, and then choosing the screen over there.
Side. Yeah, this has to be. Yes, yeah. Share. And share.
There we go.
Now can you see it?
Yes. Just click on that button to make it full screen, the little TV stand next to the slide bar on the right, bottom right. There we go.
All right, cool. I'm sorry about that, guys. Thank you so much for being patient. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thanks to the Georgia Council for Recovery for the invitation to be here too. I want to make sure I thank them for this opportunity. Real quickly, I want to tell you just a short story. I'm in White Lake, Michigan. I don't know if I've ever been here before. It's in Oakland County. That's the county where I was born and raised, if you want to call it that. There's a town hall meeting tonight. They're discussing how to spend $39 million in opioid settlement funds. I was invited here to give a 5-minute pitch on trying to develop a program that's specific to returning citizens, brothers and sisters coming home from jail and prison. I have 4 friends and an acquaintance who, after serving several years in and out of prison, all died from fentanyl overdoses within 365 days after being home from prison. One did 45 years, came home, died within a year. One did 45, came home for a year, went back for 5 years. So he did 50 years and over a 51-year period, came home the last time, died. 2 others that did a little shorter sentences, and they both died. And then a friend, the husband, of a good friend of mine who did a long sentence in prison, came home and died as well. So they invited me to here to do a pitch tonight. So that's why I'm in White Lake, Michigan. And I had purchased a ticket to the fundraiser tomorrow with Georgia Council for Recovery. So if somebody needs a ticket, feel free to just reach out and you can have that ticket and you can attend. Tomorrow night I am speaking at a Recovery Month event in Detroit. And I speak at a Recovery Month event next Saturday in Toledo, Ohio. So I get a chance to travel a little bit, so I like that. I am part of cohort 45. My name is in lowercase because it's a sign of humility for me. I do have 39 years of sustained recovery, and what that simply means is that it's been that long since I last used any illicit substances, misused any prescription medication, or consumed any alcohol. I achieved my recovery through a 12-step recovery program. I sustained my recovery by being active in my 12-step recovery program and by being active in my faith. They're both important to me. They both have equal value. Neither one is more important than the other. I utilize principles from both programs to sustain me in my recovery. So I'm happy to say that I got two pathways that I utilize on a daily basis. Have you ever heard the phrase death by PowerPoint? It's a phrase in the book, Games Trainers Play. If you've never seen that book, it's a pretty cool book. It's not only about 30 pages. Teaches you how to add fluff to your presentations when you don't have enough time to, when you don't have enough content to cover the entire time of the presentation. Death by PowerPoint means that you get beat up with the PowerPoints. I don't want to do that. I want us to be an interactive presentation. I want you to be able to join in, ask questions, and even comment to a certain degree. If you're going to comment, you can only give like 15, 20-second comments. You can't do that where you just talk. Part of the reason why you can't do that is because I'm the only person who gets to talk that long in this particular presentation. And two, we might end up running out of time. And if we run out of time, we might not get a chance to cover all of the content. So I want to make sure that we get a chance to cover all of the content. So I promise not to bore you. And hopefully I promise not to put you to sleep, but I do want this to be an interactive presentation. I want to start with an icebreaker. Now, Alvin, you're going to have to help me with this because I can't see any faces. I can only see the screen. So this is the icebreaker. That's me. And I want somebody to tell me what those numbers represent. And the best way to figure out what those numbers represent is to use what we call in research inductive reasoning. That means you take what you have, and from that, you try to come to a conclusion. So tell me what it is you have, and tell me how it is you can figure out what those numbers are. And we don't have a lot of time to spend on this. We can only spend a couple minutes. And again, Alvin, you're going to have to help me with this. If somebody puts up their hand, or if they can come off mute on your own, I want somebody to tell me what those numbers represent and how you got
Reggie's Reggie, you're unmuted. Have you got an answer?
From my lived experience, I think it's probably not correct, but that would be your prison ID number.
That's a really good guess, Reggie. Whose prison ID number is it, though?
Oh man, that's heavy.
Well, that was a good guess. So all you have to do now, Reggie, is take the two, what it is you can see, and put the two together. Tell me what it is you can see.
The year 1964.
What else do you see?
I don't know.
Sure you do. Tell me about the words. Can you not see the words?
Robben Island Museum. Okay. What we might. I'm clueless.
What was Robben Island before it was a museum?
I really don't know, but I would guess a prison.
It was a prison.
It was Rikers Island?
Not Rikers Island. Rikers Island is in New York. This is Robben Island Museum. It was a prison before the museum. Where?
You're from up top, so
would it be in Michigan?
No.
In Washington, D.C.?
Another country.
Okay.
On another continent.
Africa.
Africa.
It's in Africa.
Where in Africa?
The Door of Freedom.
Ivory Coast.
Huh? No.
Africa.
The southern part of Africa. What city is the furthest south in Africa you can
South
get?
Africa.
Right. What city is south of that?
Johannesburg.
Johannesburg.
What famous person we know from South Africa that was in prison?
Mandela. Nelson Mandela.
President Mandela's prison number. Robben Island was the prison where he did 17 of the 31 years that he was in prison. It's now a museum. If you ever get a chance to visit South Africa, try to visit Robben Island's prison. Robben Island is now a museum, and see the cell that's about 6 feet by 4 feet where he spent 17 years, 23 hours a day in that cell with nothing but a little pot that they gave him for using the bathroom. That was a good guess. That was good. I'm proud of you guys, man. If I was a professor now, been trained as a professor, I would be giving you all some kind of compensation today. Maybe a sucker or a Snickers. Maybe not a Snickers, but give you something. Maybe.
We'll send you our cash app.
Okay, yeah. Let's keep going. What are we going to talk about today? And that was really good. I really appreciate that, you guys making that guess. So Robben Islands is where President Mandela did 17 of his 31 years in prison. What we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk about disparities in substance use among African people of African ancestry. That simply refers to people who sometimes are referred to as Black people, other times referred to as African Americans, but there are people of African ancestry here in our country who are neither born here or raised here, so they don't really refer to themselves as African American or Black, but they are people of African ancestry. We're going to talk about proof that these disparities warrant what I call culturally specific care. Now, what's culturally specific care? I call it African-centered recovery coaching. We're going to talk a lot about what it means to be African-centered and what it means to combine that principle with recovery coaching. Combine those two principles, recovery coaching with being African-centered. And at the end, we're going to talk about what we might do as care to improve these disparities. There are disparities. These disparities aren't new. They've been around for a long time, and we're going to talk about it. I want somebody to tell me, what do they see in the top photo in this slide? Anybody, tell me what you see.
Martin
the top
Luther King.
Civil rights leaders.
All right, that's good. Civil rights leaders. Anybody see anything else?
They all thinking.
They
Yeah,
all seem to be
thinking,
Yeah,
yes.
they seem to be thinking.
Anybody see anything else?
Legend.
They look stressed.
Revolutionary.
Stressed? Okay. Anybody see anything else?
Yes, for me, I see leaders who have forged the way for people who were actually transported to America, but we also have to think about the African race that was already indigenous to this, continent.
Okay, cool. So you think that there were African people here?
We can't really call them African, because some of us were already here.
Okay. So you really think that there were people of African ancestry who were here before Christmas
Absolutely.
Columbus got here? All right, cool.
Absolutely.
Anybody else see anything else?
Loretta Billingsley has her hand up. Loretta, do you want to say something?
Yeah, this may be way off, but with Martin Luther King, I see his hand toward his mouth in his speech that was so moving and so life-changing. For Barack Obama, his thought processes, and for this person on the right, someone help me, lost the name.
Malcolm X.
Malcolm X. Through sight, he's pointing at his eyes. So I looked at where their hands were.
Okay.
All good orators.
Anybody else?
All great speakers.
All great speakers. Very good. Does anybody get a good feeling when they see this picture? Does it impact you in a prideful way? Does it make you feel good about who you might be? And who
What I see is individuals who made some changes in our culture and some changes in America.
Okay. Cool. Does anybody see Martin Luther King, Barack Obama, Malcolm X?
Yes.
Yes.
Would anybody see them? Would anybody address them differently than the way that I just addressed them?
I see a free thinker.
Dr. King, President Obama.
Okay, that was good. Dr. King, President Obama. I think some folks call Malcolm Brother Malcolm.
Reverend Martin Luther King. Yeah.
Cool. Let's not certainly leave out the picture below. Let's go to the second picture below. Tell me who you see there. What do you see there?
The strong
Coretta
women
Scott
behind
King.
the man.
Michelle Obama. And I think that's
Malcolm's wife.
Anybody know
Okay.
what Malcolm's wife's name is?
Martin Luther King's wife.
Merle Evers Williams.
Loretta.
Okay.
I see the men behind, the
Benedict
ladies
Shabazz.
behind the men.
The rib of each
Yeah.
man.
The
Okay.
help me. They help me.
Helpmates.
I think for me, I see the duality, you know, the pillars of strength, not only in the men, but in the women, that it takes two
Yeah.
sometimes to hold up a structure.
Wow.
Proverbs 31 women.
What about names? Anybody know the names of these sisters?
Coretta Scott King, Michelle Obama, and I don't know the other lady. But someone said that was Malcolm's ex-wife.
Betty Shabazz.
Her name is Betty
Betty
Shabazz.
Shabazz. Betty Shabazz.
Very good. There's a college or a university in New York City named after her, right? Isn't there?
Hmm.
Or at least a school. What about when you put these photos together? What do you see?
Strength and hope and
Power,
and some suffering too. I mean, there's been suffering for all.
faith,
Power,
Resilience.
unity.
integrity.
It's almost like you see the weight of the world more on the men, and the women are, you know, look a little stronger, prouder, like supporting them, you know.
Stephanie, your hand is up.
So I will say this. I see the product of a man and a woman of the African American race assisting each other in making progress in the world that we live in today. But it hasn't happened. You know, there was only one and we're gonna be honest, you know, I'm just an honest person. There was only one couple out of these 6 that made sure that, okay, we're speaking, you're not hearing for us, but now we're gonna raise hell, so you have to hear us. And that will be Malcolm X and Betty Shabazz for me. You know, because that's something I'm currently living today. And it's just by the grace of my higher power that I'm here to even see this. Because we got to state the facts now, not information, the facts.
I think
So-
for me,
Okay, go ahead.
what we don't see is that these men didn't have an open lane to do what they had to do unless the women weren't taking care of business. They couldn't worry about babysitters or this and that. Like, they took care of the household, the kids, and the imminent threat that came with that. They didn't tap out. You know what I mean? And I think in order for them to be behind every strong man, of course, there's definitely a strong woman. You know, and there's a lot of these gentlemen get a lot of credit, but I think, you know, like we said, was the pillars, right? Somebody had to back them on what you don't see on the back end. Start taking care of the kids, the imminent threat, you know, and they didn't stop them from doing what they needed to do, which is a beautiful thing.
Wow, well said.
Stephanie has her hand up and has for a while. Stephanie, do you want to say something?
Yeah, what I see is 3 strong women in their own right, because not only did they take care of home and kids, they also forged the way for different avenues as it relates to women. So they were also on the front lines, you know, letting their voices be heard, you know, paving the way for African American women, you know, because women didn't have many rights either, you know. And so I feel like just as the 3 men were fighting, the 3 women were fighting on their own, you know, ideals and choices and things.
Very good. Well said. Excellent comments. We're going to talk about how we can feel better about ourselves when we learn about our history. And when I'm talking about we, I'm talking about people of African ancestry. But others can feel good about themselves too from learning about our history. There's a lot of history to be learned in this evening's presentation, so I want to keep going. For those of you who may have your hand up again, I can't see. There'll be other opportunities for you to answer some questions, and maybe those who didn't get a chance to respond this time will be those who will get a chance to answer the questions next time. Alvin, here's where we do a true and false pretest. Can we do that now?
Yeah.
All right,
Are
these
you
are the
seeing that?
questions. This is a true and false quiz. The
It's-
first question is,
Does a person have to be Black or African American to be an African-centered recovery coach? Yes or no?
I don't know.
All right, we've had 20 people respond so far. We'll leave it up for another few seconds. See if we can get some more people in there.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
All right, I'm going to end the poll. Anybody else want to poll in? Do it now. Here we go. 65% of you, 15 out of 23, say that no, you do not have to be an African American to be an African-centered recovery coach.
65%?
65% said no.
Okay, cool. Let's go to the next one.
All right. Hang on just a second. And here's one that I missed. Is this one too soon? It says, what does it mean to be disproportionately affected by a disease?
Let's do this, Alvin. You see the questions that are on the pretest is on the screen, right?
Yeah.
Let's just ask, can we just get them to respond to this? Because I get a feeling we're gonna run out of
All right,
time.
we just have one other poll question here, so I'm going to launch it. Hang on just a second. Between 2014 and 2017, which ethnic group experienced, can y'all see that?
No, you have the other one up.
All right. Oh, okay, cool. Let me bounce that back. No, end that one. There we go. Then we'll do this one. There we go. Between 2014 and 2017, which ethnic group experienced the highest increase in the number of opioid-related overdose deaths in a percentage? Whites, Blacks, or Latinos? All right, we've had 15 people answer so far. All right, we're up to 21. I'm going to stop it in just a second. 22. All right, I will. 25. That's a good one. So let's share the results. Can y'all see that? It says 40% said whites, 40% said Blacks, and 20% said Latinos.
Wow. Okay. I'm gonna hold on to those questions. Alvin, are you able to ask some true or false questions for the questions I have in the pretest?
I can read them, but we don't have poll questions for them.
Okay, so let's just
sorry.
see.
Do you want me to read them?
Please.
All right, so Malcolm X is oftentimes referred to as the first Black person to recover from addiction. True or false? And make a note of your answer because we'll come back to this.
Do we answer now or when?
False.
We're just asking because those are not set up as poll questions.
Yeah.
Okay,
That would be false.
I say true.
He would be the one.
I didn't even know he had
He
I
would
don't
be
know that much about
the
Malcolm
first
X.
to
He had a
verbalize.
He had a heroin addiction.
Okay.
Right, but
all
he's
right.
not the first Black person to recover from addiction. He was the first time to bring addiction to it.
Okay, let's go to one of the next questions.
All right, to be Afrocentric is to be anti-white. True or false?
False.
False.
That's false.
Oh.
That seems like a pretty consensus on false there.
Okay.
All right.
And then the other one, the concept of African-centered recovery coaching was born out of the addiction recovery movement of 2001.
True.
False.
I think that might have been true. I don't know.
False.
I don't know the facts.
It would be
Me
false,
neither.
as the concept of recovery coaching was born out of the addiction recovery movement in the Caucasian community, because they saw a high rate of Caucasians dying from addiction than African Americans, which we may have a larger rate, but the concept wasn't adapted in 2001. I mean, that's just my belief, but
Okay.
you can
There's one more, and then we're going to keep it
explain the
moving.
facts. So
Which other one is here, David? Only Black people can be African-centered recovery coaches? Is that the
What
one?
about the one that says people of African ancestry have a more difficult time accessing recovery than white Americans? Is that
There we
not?
go.
That's true.
True.
Yeah, I believe that's true.
I think we have a consensus on that one too.
Very good. Let's keep it moving, y'all, because we got a lot to cover.
We do.
I want to talk about ancestry, taking pride in our history. This is basically what the concept of African-centered, Afrocentricity, Afrocentric, all phrases you will hear me use tonight, they're all interchangeable. They all basically mean the same thing. And this is what they mean. This is what we mean when we say African-centered, Afrocentric, or Afrocentricity. We mean taking a group of people of African ancestry, like those of us who are African-American, who live here in the United States, and teach us how to take pride in our history. Teach us about our history as African people and our culture. Teach us that Africa is the birthplace of man. We believe that, many of us. It's the birthplace of education. We believe that, many of us. And it's the birthplace of science and the birthplace of faith. So if Africa is truly the place where the first human beings ever walked the face of this earth, if it's the location for the founding of education, we have evidence of that, the founding of science, and the founding of faith, what would that tell you about African people? Well, because we don't have a lot of time and I can't let everybody respond to that, I'm gonna tell you what I think it means, and then later on in this presentation, you will get a chance to tell me what you think that means. To me, that means that we're special. Not more special, but special. There's something special about being first. In my opinion, there's something special about being home to education, to science, and to faith. Now, there are people, if you go down to this very last bullet, challenges this theory. There are folks who challenge this theory. They'll tell you, for example, there are people who will tell you that Africa is not the birthplace of mankind, that there were people in other parts of the world, in Europe, that's usually what they say, people in Europe predate people in Africa, even though the evidence says the exact opposite. There are people who will tell you that there's no evidence that Africa is the home to education. But we know the first learning institutions in this world were founded in Northeast Africa. We know that. Now, the Greeks try to claim some of that, and true Afrocentricity recognizes the great contributions that the Greeks have made to civilization. Unlike what some people do who are not African, how they respond to stories that Africa is the foundation of education. They will argue that, or they will try to disprove that, instead of just giving us the props that we deserve. What we believe as Afrocentric teachers and scholars is that we take the pride that comes from that. The pride that many of you displayed when I showed you those pictures of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, President Barack Obama, Brother Malcolm X, the picture of Coretta Scott King, the picture of Michelle Obama, and a picture of Sister Betty Shabazz. You should have seen or heard the excitement in some of your voices. I could tell that many of you got excited when you saw those pictures of those powerful Black people. It's called pride. It's a thing that happens to a group of people when something or someone in their group does something that they believe is miraculous or exciting or important. You get pride about it. Gay pride is a perfect example. There are many people in the gay community who get extremely excited when somebody who's from the LGBTQ community gets elected in a high position. It makes sense. It makes them feel good about themselves. So what we're proposing in this African-centered recovery coach training is that we're going to take the pride that comes from that learning. We're going to use that pride to build esteem in the people that we serve and the service recipients, those that we coach every single day. We're going to teach them how to take pride in their history and in their culture. And we're going to teach them how to raise their esteem as a result of being excited about learning about the major accomplishments that we made as African people and as African Americans. And then we use that pride, we use that self-esteem to encourage them to use that in a way that prevents them from ever, or at least reduces their risk from ever using alcohol and drugs or being involved in any kind of self-destructive behaviors ever. Now, I'm gonna show you something. I'll give you some examples of this pride real quick before I go. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember when Dr. King's birthday became a holiday. I do. I remember it was right here in Atlanta, 1978, 1979. We had a big celebration at what used to be called the Omni. It's not there anymore. I think they blew it up and built something else. Well, the Omni Hotel is there, but the Omni Arena is not there. Stevie Wonder was the person who performed. We sang all night. I remember when Juneteenth became a holiday, how excited Black people got. I don't know how many of you remember the day Tiger Woods won his first Masters at the Masters in Augusta. The camera, he was like 18 shots in the lead. Folks had never seen anybody win the Masters at this rate. So he was at the 18th hole about to put in his last shot, and they moved the camera to the wait staff at the Masters, all Black. Dark-skinned brothers with white jackets on. And almost everybody in the gallery were all white people. Well, the Masters was a venue that was known for only hosting rich white people. So in the kitchen, there was these brothers. They was all dressed out in white, real dark skin, all excited. And then Tiger shot his last shot and it went in, and they all exploded. And they had the cameras on. They were jumping up and down, hugging each other. They were so freaking excited to see what they believe was a Black man win the Masters for the first time. What about when Venus Williams won the first Wimbledon, the first Black woman to win the Wimbledon? I was in South Africa that day at the Asian International Conference. And it was 16,000 people there from all over the country. And where we stayed in this dorm at a college, those of us who were on partial scholarship, and they put us all up in these dorms. And we were out watching the match. And I wasn't big in tennis, but I was big into Venus. She was a Black woman. And so there were 16,000 people from all over the world. And so in this room where we were at, there was probably a couple hundred people. Black people or people of African ancestry from all over the continent of Africa and all over from other parts of the world, and white people from all different parts of the world. When Venus won that match, every Black person in there, many of us couldn't even communicate with each other because we spoke different languages, jumped 3 feet off the floor. It was a kind of pride. It was like, even for those of us who didn't even like tennis, it was just a great feeling that we got to see a Black woman win Wimbledon. My final one I want to talk about is the Minority AIDS Initiative. I can remember when I was at Recovery Consultants many years ago. Even before then, I remember in 1994 when President Clinton signed the Minority AIDS Initiative. Every Black person in America who worked in HIV, AIDS, who worked in substance use treatment, we were all in front of our TVs, and he signed this initiative that set aside, I forget that it was an ungodly amount of money. I think it was like over $160 million that would go directly to Black organizations to provide HIV education and prevention and testing in predominantly African-American communities, because this epidemic was just like out of control in the African-American community at this point in time. So we got excited. I remember we wrote a grant. We got the grant. We got one of the Minority AIDS Initiative grant in 2003. So me and a sister who worked together, we traveled to DC. And she always says when I tell the story, she said, "Yeah, Dave, remember that suit you had on?" I had on a zoot suit. So we go into Washington, D.C. to meet all these other young Black people who lead all these HIV initiatives across America as a result of this Minority AIDS Initiative. And we get there, and we was one of only 2 or 3 Black people who was at the entire event. And so I said to her, maybe we're at the wrong meeting. I thought we were at the wrong meeting. And then Dr. Clark, who was the CSAT Center Director at that time, he popped up. He said, "No, David," said, "you're at the right meeting." He said, these grants are still competitive. So Black people still have to compete. They wouldn't just write checks to Black organizations, and all the best grant writers during that time were all white people. And there are still talk to this day. Now, this was in 1994. There's still talk to this day how much of that Minority AIDS Initiative money never reached Black people, how it was mismanaged by several non-Black organizations. but I don't want to get off on that. There are folks who challenge this theory. I want you guys to know that there are folks who don't believe that Afrocentricity is real. They don't believe that the history of people started in Africa. They think that we're just a bunch of lunatics who try to use this as a way to motivate, encourage, and uplift our people. I believe the latter part of that. This is truly about uplifting our people, but I also believe that Africa is the home to many of the places.
So David, this is your halfway mark.
Okay, cool. So that means I got to speed it up. I will speed it up. Slaying the Dragon is the Bible for those of us who work as CARES recovery coaches. Bill White is one of my heroes. Bill White wrote Slaying the Dragon, The History of Addiction, Treatment, and Recovery. Bill, in this book, on page 238, talks about essentially, he tells the story about Brother Malcolm, who rose from being a dope dealing, cocaine snorting, reefer smoking, cocaine sniffing brother from the streets to becoming one of the greatest civil rights leaders of all time. While Malcolm was early in the Nation of Islam, he created this program called Fishing, where they literally went out. This was back in the days when heroin had hit Harlem, New York, Newark, New Jersey, other parts of the Northeast, major Midwestern cities like Chicago, Detroit, St. Louis. Heroin came from out of nowhere. This high potent heroin just dropped in these black communities. Just came from. Malcolm told the story. Remember, Malcolm tells the story about being in love with Billie Holiday. He said he loved him and Billie Holiday were good friends, and then she got addicted to heroin, and Malcolm said it just broke her heart. And so, if you ever read the history of the heroin epidemic in New York City, it just out of nowhere it hit Harlem. During this time, Harlem was the most how do you describe it? Harlem Renaissance. It was the city where they had black musicians, Langston Hughes, Connie Collins. Remember all the jazz greats? They all moved there. And Harlem had become a city that was rich in black culture. They had black music, black dance, black art, black poetry, black everything. And out of nowhere, this heroin epidemic just came. So Malcolm claims the heroin epidemic was no accident. Hey, Alvin, am I supposed to click on this and open this, or were you supposed to click on this? Because I really want them to see this.
You have to stop sharing for me to be able to open it.
Can I do it? Can you guys see that?
Yeah, you got it. That's
all right,
good.
cool. All right, so the answer to one of those questions is no, Malcolm X is not the black person to recover from addiction, but we know who was. His name was Frederick Douglass. And I don't have time to give you a history. Hopefully you know who Frederick Douglass is and was, but right here it says Frederick Douglass was the first prominent American, not the first prominent African American, but the first prominent American. This was before Alcoholics Anonymous, to recover from alcohol use. This is what Bill White said. Douglass' alcoholism was triggered by the trauma he endured in slavery. Check out what Douglass says. Douglass believed that alcohol was used to control the enslaved people. He believed the slave owners gave slaves alcohol as a way to control them. In his autobiography, he stated that the enslaved would be abused Monday through Friday and given alcohol to drink on Saturday as medicine for the abuse. This is what he said. In a speech in Scotland in 1846, Douglass stated, when a slave was drunk, the slaveholder had no fear that he would plan an insurrection. That means as long as the slave owners kept the black people drunk, they didn't have to worry about them trying to escape or trying to revolt, right? No fear that they would escape to the north. It was the sober, thinking slave who was dangerous and needed vigilance of the slave owner to keep him a slave. Speaking on his own personal alcohol use, Douglass says this: I used to drink. I found in me all those characteristics leading to drunkenness. In other words, he's saying that he was a drunk. He saw it in him. Today, we would call him someone who's alcohol dependent. He went on to state, I've had some experience with intemperance. That means sobriety. I knew what it was like to drink with all the ardor of a drunk. Some of the slaves were not able to drink their share. I was able to drink my own and theirs too. That's what Frederick Douglass, if you really want to read about his history as a person in recovery, I would encourage you to do that. Oops. Shoot. I didn't mean to do that. All right. Can you see the screen again now?
Yes, we can. You want to use that little button down. There we go.
No, I got it. Yep, I want to keep going. So this is the best book in the world for those of us who are in recovery. It's the Bible for those of us who work as cares as recovery coaches. If you haven't seen or read it, I would suggest you get it. There's a revised version of it. Bill White has been a hero to the recovery movement. He was one of the pioneers. He was part of the research team that George talked about in our CARES training. Remember, he talked about the Chestnut Health System. He mentioned Mike Dennis, Bill White were the primary researchers on that. You remember the data that Neil used to cite a lot, and George cited it too in his CARES training. Remember, I don't have time to actually turn this into a question, so I just have to share with you. For example, the data that says that if we keep a person engaged in recovery for a minimum of 5 years, we can reduce their relapse or their setback rate to less than 15%. That research came from Bill White, Michael Dennis, and the Chestnut Health System. So if you ever get a chance
David, Tia has her hand up. Tia, do you have a brief question?
Not a brief question, just a statement I wanted to address as far as Frederick Douglass and his alcoholism. We also have to look at the fact of, okay, that was a way to keep Afrocentric, let's use that word, Americans under their control. But once, it started spreading to the other cultures, that's when prohibition came. So we do have to think about that, and we do have to realize that that is the same thing that's happening now. It was fine when it was just Afrocentric. I'm just going to use that word because that's the term that we're using. But it wasn't a problem then until it started moving into separate cultures or separate ethnicities. And then that's where they wanted to come in and let's do something about it.
I agree. And I want you to hold on to that thought
That's
because
what I'm saying. I just wanted to say that,
I'm gonna bring that very point up again in just a short while. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Thanks.
Because I'm afraid we're gonna run out of time. I'm gonna have to keep it going though. But the African-centered approaches to addiction recovery is not new. I just showed you. We know that Malcolm made his conversion in 1949 in a prison cell. Supposedly Malcolm was they called him the devil when he was in prison because he didn't believe in God. And this one brother befriended him who had become a member of the Nation of Islam while he was in prison, and that's how Malcolm converted. Supposedly, Malcolm went back to a cell and had this spiritual awakening, and the next day started reading and studying Islam. And then once he became a member of the Nation of Islam after he left prison, he created this fishing model where they were responsible for going out recruiting African Americans who were using heroin. That was the drug of choice, and they detoxed them with a cold, wet cloth and chicken soup. That's how they detox them. Bill White would go on to compare Malcolm's conversion to the one that Bill Wilson had. Bill White claims that they were both almost identical. We know Bill Wilson was in the hospital for the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th time, I can't remember. And he was just, he said, screamed out, God, if you real, show me your face. Remember? Because he wasn't going for that. Because some folks came and tried to convert him. They tried to get him to sign up to be a Christian. And then later that night, Bill just said, God, if you real, show your face. And supposedly there's this white light that went off in this voice that Bill Wilson heard. And the next thing you know, he and Dr. Bob created Alcoholics Anonymous. So Bill White in this book compares what Bill Wilson went through and what Malcolm went through. He said they were both identical. They both had these kind of spiritual awakenings. So I just want to say that. I want to tell you real quickly, this is not new. We have evidence of African-centered recovery programs right here in Atlanta. Trinity House was one that some of us may be familiar with, downtown, Afrocentric. You come in there off the streets, they serve only men. When you graduate the program, you have an African name because they believe that the real transformation took place when you went back to your roots. Some of you remember Trinity House. It's still downtown. Actually, it's located in the same building that used to be the funeral home that embalmed the great Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It's right off of Auburn. Corliss, one of the co-founders of Corliss, is on this meeting with us tonight. Corliss was the first African-centered, culturally specific treatment program here in Atlanta. They only treated African Americans. They started at Physicians and Surgeons Hospital way out on Bolton Road. They would later go to Anchor Hospital and Ridgeview. They have programs in all three of those hospitals. Ujima Recovery Center was the first ever recovery community organization funded by the Department of Behavioral Health Disabilities, DBHDD. They had a different name back then. Ujima Recovery Center was on Cascade. Now, I forget they changed the name. Ujima Recovery Center was a heck of a recovery community organization. It was funded in 1992, 1993 by the state of Georgia. It was in a church. It was right across the street. Was it right across the street? I think it was right across or down the street from the Shrine of the Black Madonna. It was an awesome recovery center. We didn't just have traditional 12-step meetings. We had some traditional 12-step meetings there, but we had some Afrocentric recovery support group meetings there too. We did this annual event, or it wasn't an annual event. We did this event that's called Come and Get Your Culture. We invited all these people in recovery who were African American. We taught them about how powerful they were as African people. We taught them about all the major accomplishments and contributions that we've made to this world and this world civilization. It was absolutely awesome. That was an awesome event. I was a part of that. Nate was one of the directors of that. Kenny Beverly was another one of the directors of that. And it was funded 100% by the state of Georgia. It was the first ever recovery community organization before we even called them RCOs. We called them recovery centers back then. And it was the only one that had a specific goal of addressing addiction and addiction recovery in the African American community. White Bison, many of us know Don Coyer as well. Don Coyer is one of the first recovery community organizations funded by SAMHSA back in 2001, the same time that SAMHSA funded Recovery Consultants of Atlanta here in Atlanta. White Bison has been culturally specific since day one. We got to keep going because we're going to run out of time. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this but you're going to get these slides, and I hope you'll read this. I'm going to tell you what this says. This says that supposedly President Biden and Vice President Harris have formed this conclusion that they think the disparity in sentencing for Black people is something that should be eradicated. For example, if you're Black and you get caught with 10 ounces of crack cocaine, and you're white and you get caught with 10 ounces of powder cocaine, the person who gets caught with 10 ounces of crack cocaine is going to do a sentence that's 10 times longer than the person who's going to get caught with 10 ounces of powder cocaine. Now, what's wrong with that? Well, the person most likely to get caught with 10 ounces of crack cocaine is somebody who's Black. Now, there are those of us, we teach this in our Afrocentric recovery culture. We say, look, you think you in prison by accident? You think your sentence is longer than his because you just had a stroke of bad luck? No, what's real is that the system is designed to incarcerate you and to keep you incarcerated for a long time. When I was a kid, you used to get 2 years in the penitentiary, then you come off for good behavior after like 12, 13 months. And then when I got a little older, they changed the rules. You get 20 years, you do all 20, right? But the issue was that there were Black people who were disproportionately being incarcerated. You've heard the term sentencing disproportionate. How you say it? Sentencing disproportionate.
Disproportionate sentencing?
Yeah, that one. So that's exactly what I just described to you. And so in addition to that, I want to just highlight what President Biden and Vice President Harris claim. Is that a recent study showed that Black individuals, I'm reading from the first sentence in the last paragraph, generally enter addiction treatment 4 to 5 years later than white individuals. I just want to stop right there. Because everything we learned in CARES had already warned me about this, right? I remember, I know we're in the training in CARES that I was taught to be on the lookout for this. Let me tell you what that means. This is what this means. And this is what Bill White writes in this book. Remember the Chestnut Health System study that I told you about, the Bill White, Michael Dennis, the one that George cited from, I don't know how many times when we was in our CARES training. This is what they did. Over a 10-year period, they tracked 15,000 people who went to government-funded treatment programs in the state of Illinois. And they tracked them and they asked them a bunch of questions. And these are some of the things that they learned. They learned that most of them have been in publicly funded treatment 4 to 5 times. Let me tell you what's problematic about that. This is what we know as CARES, and this is what we know as recovery coaches. And this is what we post to at Afrocentric Recovery, because it's Ebonics and that's part of my culture. Supposed to know as a CARES. I know if you go in treatment 4 or 5 times, by the time you get to me, this is going to be your reality. You'll have 3 or 4 felony convictions. You'll have most of your teeth missing. You'll be living with diabetes, hypertension, hepatitis C, maybe HIV. You'll have a terrible work history. And then you go show up and say, okay, I'm ready. That's what that means. So when we see President Biden say Black people enter treatment 4 to 5 years later than their white counterparts, that's important for me as an African recovery coach. I need to know that. I know I'm gonna have to do something extra special to be able to coach this person to a point where they begin to see value in recovery or begin to believe in themselves that they too can recover. So I didn't mean to hit that. Let's keep going. Look, I know I'm gonna run out of time. George, Alvin, you're gonna let me know when I get close to quitting time. I want to show you this.
So we're after 6 o'clock now. I'll give you a 6:15. That'll be 15 minutes before we're done.
All right, I'm gonna go fast. This is what this slide means. If you look over here in 2009, this is in the blue, in the red, excuse me, it's the number of Black people who are accessing government-funded treatment. These are treatment that this data comes from Samson. So when you go to work and they take money out your check and they keep it, they use part of that money to pay for treatment for folks who ain't got no money and no insurance. So this is the money that comes out of your check to pay for treatment for folks who ain't got no money and insurance. Look at the few number of Black people who were accessing treatment in 2009 with your tax dollars. Look at the number of white people in the blue that were accessing publicly funded treatment with your tax dollars. It's a hell of a disparity, right? Look how significant this disparity is. You think that's something? Let's go 10 years later, to 2019. Oops, shoot, my bad. To 2019. Look how the gap has gotten even wider. Look, there's a significant increase in the number of white people who were getting treatment paid for by your tax dollars, while at the same time, there were fewer Black people. That's no accident. Let me tell you what happened. I wish I had a little bit more time. I can tell you the long and short is there was an epidemic, opioid epidemic that a lot of you are familiar with. So the government said, okay, we got to focus more on folks who are at risk for fatal overdoses as a result of opioids, and also white people in suburban and rural communities. Wasn't no arguing that. They were dying and they needed some attention and they needed some interventions and they needed programs that would prevent them from dying. I was all on board for that. But this is where the butt is. We ain't got no new money. So what we got to do in order to address that is we got to do what? We got to take money away from others in order to address their crises. And what resulted was a fewer number of Black people accessing treatment, but a greater number of white people who are accessing treatment. I could do a whole presentation on this slide, and I hate that I'm about to run out of time because this is my favorite slide in the whole wide world. I could do a 4-hour presentation with just this one slide. Check this out. I'm gonna show you real quickly. Now, some would argue, I'm trained as a researcher. I'm trained as a lot of things. I'm trained as a researcher. I'm trained as a professor. I didn't tell you all that kind of stuff because it's not important, because what I am as a CARES. I'm a person who uses my lived experience to motivate others to a point where they see value in recovery. That's what I do better than anything else. But I'm trained as a clinician. I can counsel you too. I'm trained as a professor. I'm trained as an evaluator. I'm trained as a lot of things. But what I do best is I coach people. So somebody who might say, okay, David, they're kind of sophisticated. First thing we'll look at and say, this is kind of dated. This data is from 2016. Yeah, but I can assure you that the reality hasn't changed. So let me show you what this graph says. First of all, let's start with 12-year-olds and 19-year-olds. On the left is white people, on the right is Black people. So it says how many white kids between the ages of 12 and 19 went to treatment for heroin addiction. This is just people with heroin use. between 2004 and 2014. You can see it's fairly significant, but the line is the same. There were some white kids between ages of 12 and 19 who accessed publicly funded treatment who had heroin misuse or heroin use disorder, which is cool. We want to pay for treatment. We want our government. I do want my tax dollars to pay for treatment. If somebody can't go to treatment, spill my tax dollars and send them on treatment. I wouldn't care what color they were. But let's look over to the right. These are the black kids. Look at the percentage that they access. This is the blue right here. They don't. It ain't because they don't use heroin, because I know they do. And the reason why I know they do, because I was shooting heroin every single day when I was 16 years old. Didn't miss a day. So I know they do. Guess where black kids 12 to 19 go to get their care? It ain't in public funded treatment, but it's public funded. They go to jails and juvenile homes and jails. I got to keep going because I'm going to run out of time. But look, let's go up here to this one here, the red arrow. These are white kids, white people, between the ages of 34 years old who use heroin. Look at the percentage that they access treatment. This is treatment paid for by your tax dollars. So if you white between the age of 20 and 34, you ain't got no money and no insurance, no problem. I'm gonna use my tax dollars to send you to treatment. I ain't got no problem with that. I want my tax dollars to go for people to go to treatment. But this is where I got an issue. Look at the number of black people that same age, it's that red line, way down here. And not only that, it started out, wasn't that high to begin with. It didn't go up like theirs. Theirs start here and goes up. Black start here and goes down. Fewer black people. Same thing happened. They didn't have no new money, so they shifted the money from everybody to just primarily those who were dying from opioid overdoses in rural and suburban communities. I'm gonna run out of time, so I can do a whole presentation on this. I just want to go up to the 45 years and older. That's this green line right here. Let's go over to the white side. If you're 45 years or older and you got a drug problem, you ain't got no money, you ain't got no insurance, I can get you some treatment right here. You ain't getting as much as your buddies who's 20 and 34 years old, but you're getting some treatment right here. Nor are you getting as much as those who are 35 to 44 years old, but I don't have time to talk about that. But you are getting some treatment. Let's go over here. If you're black and you're 45, look how late you are getting treatment. So let me tell you what that means. This is what that means. That means if you're black and you ain't got no money, you got no insurance, and you show up and you need a coach, I can guarantee you, you'll have 2 or 3 felony convictions. You ain't gonna have no teeth in your mouth. You'll have hypertension, you'll have diabetes, hepatitis C, and HIV. Guarantee you. Did I say 3 or 4 felony convictions? Did I say that? Guarantee you. I know. I've been doing this a long time. That's why, as an Afrocentric recovery coach, I have to know that. I have to know I'm going to get a different type of service recipient. I'm going to get a different type of person looking for a different type of service because they're going to have so many more what we call comorbid or coexisting conditions. You ain't going to just show up with a substance use disorder. You'll show up with and so what is it that we know when we used to have these transitional housing programs, and we used to put brothers, because we work with a primarily African-American population, we used to put these brothers and sisters in these apartments. We had some groups paying for it. It was a good concept. And they could live there in a safe environment. They would go outpatient treatment in our program. We would help them look for work. And then around 90 days, 120 days, I forget the number, we would tell them, well, it's time to go to work. You got to get to work and contribute to your recovery program, right? Financially, you got to give back. You got to pay to be here, in other words. You can no longer not pay to be here. And so they would go out and look for works, and their potential employers would say, well, how many felonies you got? I got 4. They said, nope, I can't hire you. And then they would come back with these long looks and this despair and say, F this. I mean, I ain't gonna never be able to get no job. I ain't gonna never be able to stay here. If I can't afford to get no job, I can't stay here. I might as well go back to doing what I do. And so we see a significant number of people from that population who go back to using substances. This is a slide that answers one of the questions. This particular journal, it's a recent journal published February 2021, says in 2019, for the first time, Black people died from overdoses at a higher rate than whites and Hispanics. That wasn't supposed to happen, but we know why it happened. It's called health disparity. This is what happened. We made medication-assisted treatment available for folks in suburban communities and rural communities, particularly more often than not, they were white, which was cool. I ain't got no issue with that. But we weren't making it available at the same rate for black people. That's what I take issue with, right? It's called disparities in treatment, health disparities. So when the COVID hit, these white people who were in medication-assisted treatment, they came and got 2 and 3 and 4 weeks and 5 weeks and 7 weeks to 8 and 10 weeks worth of advanced medication. COVID is out. People ain't coming out. We need you to have your medication. Here, come get it. We'll give you 3 months supply of Suboxone. Well, first of all, black people weren't accessing medication-assisted treatment at the same rate as white people. That was the first problem. The second problem, when COVID hit, they definitely wasn't getting it. And so what we saw during COVID was this unfortunate spike in overdose deaths among black people who used opioids. And it was a direct result of the policy to make it easier for non-black people to access treatment. Now, some of you might not believe that this stuff is true. You got to read, and you might argue, well, David, just because it's in a journal article don't make it true. That's true, but you have to study the researchers and see if it's valid, see if it's something that you believe that these people have integrity and that their research studies have integrity. Because you're right, anybody can write anything they want. But I'm trained. I told you I'm trained as a professor. I'm trained as a whole bunch of stuff. I'm also taught to believe in and trust the research. And I'm also taught that unless I have some evidence that the research is totally bogus, then I'm supposed to support it and believe it. That's what they taught me in my doctoral program at the University of Georgia. Again,
we're at about 15 minutes.
All right, so this one says the same thing. This one says that increases in black deaths during COVID was out of control. We know why. I pray that if we ever have another pandemic, and I hope we don't, but if we do, I hope that we provide care to people differently, particularly African Americans. This was a study in 20. Oh, this is not a study. This is a report from SAMHSA treatment episode data set, TEDS. All of you who have written a grant to the federal government, particularly SAMHSA, you should know what TEDS is. But in 2016, according to SAMHSA, 20% of African Americans aged 18 and older reported using an illicit drug in the past year. This was higher than the national average, which was only 18%. So you might say, David, well, there's only a 2% difference. Well, it's really greater than that because African Americans only make up 15%, 13 to 50% of this population. So we ain't never supposed to be this close to white people and doing nothing. We definitely ain't supposed to be exceeding them. That's called a disproportionate rate of impact. One of my professors at University of Georgia, Jerome Shealy, one of my heroes, you can see he doesn't have any credentials by his name because he's real Afrocentric. Afrocentric says it ain't about my credentials. It's about what I believe. He's the Afrocentric social worker. Every client or every patient that he serves gets an Afrocentric intervention. Every student that he teaches gets one as well. Anybody know Roland? Roland wrote the book, Relapse Prevention for African Americans. Me and Roland used to shoot heroin together when we was kids.
Wow.
He has an awesome story in the basic text. It's called The Point. The basic text of Narcotics Anonymous, 6th edition of Narcotics Anonymous, the best story you ever read in your life. If you don't believe me, read it, call me and tell me it wasn't the best recovery story you ever read in your life. We shoot heroin together when we was kids.
I'm gonna read it.
Is that time? Even Alcoholics Anonymous got a pamphlet that's specific to black people. I can't open it, but trust me, there's a AA and African American. That's what it's called. You can Google it. It's an African American pamphlet put out by Alcoholics Anonymous that essentially says that we know there's a lot of black people who are members of our fellowship who suffer from historical trauma, not trauma that happened last week. There's a presentation that I saw yesterday that did a CBS on trauma in a black community. And this lady, she was a nurse, a white nurse. She was good as hell. Didn't mean to say hell. She was good as hell. She showed this presentation where this black woman had this baby in her belly, and this black woman was being traumatized, and the baby was being traumatized at the same time. So you tell me, if you're a black woman enslaved in Africa, and you watching your man getting beat by a whip, and your baby, you think your baby ain't gonna be traumatized, and you think your baby ain't gonna pass that trauma on for generations? We talking about generational trauma here. And what we know as CARES, as recovery coaches, is that we have to be trauma informed. We have to be that before we anything. And we know the role that trauma plays in impacting the people that we serve. So as an African-centered recovery coach, that's the angle I'm coming at you. I know you experienced trauma. So that's where I'm going to start. We're going to deal with the trauma first. Peter Hayden is one of my friends, one of my heroes. He's the founder, he and Peter Bell founded the very first Afrocentric drug treatment programs in Minnesota. And the place they call it, I was in treatment once in Minneapolis. They call it a city with 10,000 treatment centers and 10,000 lakes and 100,000 treatment centers. Remember, Minneapolis was famous for treatment. He started the first ever Culturally Pacific as a friend of mine. Oh, I just did, but I got stuck. Are you guys still there? Oh yeah. All right, so we'll kind
He
of wrap this up.
actually did the favors the conference last year
He's
in Minneapolis. Yes.
Yeah,
So
Peter's my hero.
there,
He's one of my
Minneapolis.
road dogs. We've been in the game for a long time together. He mentored me for a lot of years.
Yeah, he rolled up like a road dog. So it's
let me
funny
tell
to
you-
have him in there.
Let me just bring this to closure so we can get a little conversation going. Remember, I told you I got a presentation to do at 6:30. All right. So the how we have to accept African-centered recovery coaching as a legitimate pathway. If you don't believe it, you don't have to understand it. If you don't believe in it, you have to at least understand its effectiveness. You don't have to be a Christian to be open-minded to a Christian approach to addiction recovery. You don't have to be African-centered to support this, but we would appreciate it if you would work with us to legitimize this and make it part of the mainstream recovery pathways. You have to be entrenched in Afrocentricity. You have to know everything there is to know about Black people. I'm sorry, that's just part of the requirement to be an African-centered recovery coach. And I pride myself on being an African historian. I know everything there is about Africa. I know everything there is to know about Black people because I've been studying it ever since I've been in recovery. You have to be aware of the barriers facing Black people. There's going to be a lot of people going to push back. They're going to tell you there's no such thing as African-centered nothing. You got to be aware of the fact that Black people don't access recovery at the same rate as white people, which is an answer to another one of the questions. And the reason why you have to be aware of that is because when a Black person shows up and they're in their 45s and their 40s, you better know how to do an ACEs quiz. You better know how to use the ACEs quiz because it's going to tell you everything about their trauma past and where you need to start with coaching that person. Recovery capital, you got to understand that concept. George talked about a lot during the CARES training. It's a real simple, basic concept. I define it this way. The longer you've been using substances, the chances are the lower your access to capital. That means you ain't got family members to support you. You ain't got church members, community members. You ain't got no job. It's just you. I forget what the lady, she used the phrase, you just out there by yourself. So this is what we know. So if you come to me and you tell me I've been using drugs for 25 years, I know all what comes with that as a recovery coach, as an African-centered recovery coach. I know where to start. I know where to start providing you education. I know how to start motivating you into different pathways. We got to know that. So, and another thing that's important about that, recovery capital is that concept that teaches us totally contradicts, I shouldn't say totally contradicts, but it's the opposite of what we teach in 12-step recovery program. In my 12-step recovery program, and I can talk about my program, we say you got to hit a bottom. We don't say that. It's CARES, right? Because a bottom we know means 4 or 5, 6, 7 more years out there. And the longer you're out there, the lower your recovery capital. So I want to bring your bottom up. I don't even want to use that phrase. I don't want to even encourage you to go hit no bottom. You ain't got to go back out. I'm going to start wherever you are. I'm going to give you ACEs tests. I'm going to know all about your trauma past. And I'm going to know how I need to start helping you. So that's what it means to be a recovery coach. The answers to those questions, only Black people can be African-centered recovery coaches? Absolutely not. There's no truth to that. This is a discipline. I can teach anybody to be a recovery coach. Dr. Clark would say, I can treat a monkey. I can train a monkey to be a coach, but I don't use that kind of language. Dr. Clark can get away with that. I can teach you, but people of African ancestry should be the leaders on this. We should be the ones who develop the curriculums, develop the trainings. That's what we should be. And if you tell me there's 10 Afrocentric recovery coaches at your agency and 9 of them are white, I'm gonna say, hold on now. We got an issue. because this should be a movement led by Black people. People of African ancestry have a more difficult time accessing recovery than white Americans. Overall, that's probably true. I mean, there are Black people who access treatment. There's some Black people who ain't been in public funded treatment one time and sustain their recovery for the rest of their life. But overall, I showed you the graphs that on a percentage basis, we're not accessing recovery at the same rate as white people. That's important for a recovery coach to know. Look here, bro. Chances are you getting in treatment ain't the same as that white brother over there. He might get in treatment before you. So we got to find a different way to find you a recovery pathway. Because if treatment is the only way you can find recovery, we gonna be in trouble. Because Black folks ain't accessing it the same way as white people. The concept of African-centered recovery coaching was born out of the recovery movement. I have to have some conversation with you about that. Some people might say yes, some might say no. I tell you what was born out of that movement, facing the voices of recovery. Nothing about us without us. We created that saying at that meeting in Minneapolis, October 2001. I was there. I know. We created the recovery movement. We said nothing without us about us. So we went out and told South, you can't fund no more treatment programs that don't have us at the table. It's that simple. Or we ain't participating. We started that recovery movement. And the concept of recovery coaching came out of that movement. It came out of that meeting. I don't know if culturally specific or African-centered recovery coaching came out of that. But some might say yes, because Don Coyers was at that meeting when he was talking about culturally specific for Native Americans. Malcolm X is oftentimes referred to as the first Black person to recover from addiction. We think that honor goes to Frederick Douglass. And of course not. You don't have to be Black to be an African-centered recovery coach. I'm sorry, I know that was fast. I talked fast. I wanted to make this more interactive, but I'm gonna use the next few meetings to allow you guys to have some discussion.
So David, Loretta Phelps has had her hand up for a while. Do you want to take a question?
I do.
Loretta?
Yes. Hi. Good evening, everybody. I'm Loretta Phelps, and that information to me is very questionable.
We're having a hard time understanding what you're saying.
Okay.
I can hear her. Go ahead, Loretta.
Okay. Yeah, because what your information is saying to me is very questionable. Your data stops at 2014. It's 2023. So your information needs to be upgraded. You're only doing two race of people to measure recovery when recovery is all inclusive. Now, whatever your program is, it is. But I believe, this is just my personal belief, and I'm not trying to, shortchange your program. But I personally, for me, I just and I saw these questions on your thing that's very unfair, because in any culture that we live in, it's environmental, and trauma is the basis of all situations in any type of mental health or substance use situation. When we're dealing with traumatic events, those events escalate into a situation that cause people to look for a way out. It's a masking situation. Now, understand your research. I respect what you're saying, but for me, it just doesn't do anything for me, because it's non-inclusive to the people who live and have challenges with substance use, with mental health. And people can't identify if it's not their lived experience. And that data, you can't bring something to me, to just me, at 2014, and it's 2023. Just don't measure up to me, and I don't think it's fair data to measure that. That's just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Loretta.
All right.
David,
Well,
you want to stop sharing
we'll take
your
that. We only have a few minutes left, so we want to let other people get to it.
David, you want to stop sharing your screen? There we go. Tia, did you want to say something?
My bad.
And you're muted, Tia.
I'm not gonna say I'm gonna piggyback off on Loretta. Definitely understand everything that she's saying, but I do have my own issue with it. In the Afrocentric community, we also have to think about the things that leads to other things in our community, because a lot of people out here know what I've just experienced, and a lot of people on here don't know. But it could either be to substance use or mental health. So we also have to monitor that part of the Afrocentricity. You understand what I'm saying? So it does need to be updated, because just because we're getting treatment for substance use, it doesn't mean that we are getting treatment for being products of our environment. You know, I just went through an issue of being a victim to someone that was a product of our environment. And I can guarantee you that their parents had a substance use disorder and they were unable to obtain care, because I was in that situation, I know. And I was just blessed to be able to get that care. And they weren't. So I'm fighting against the two. Do you understand what I'm saying? So it has to be all inclusive. Like Loretta said, it has to be updated. It's 2023.
Thank
and
you,
what's
Tia.
happening, excuse me, I wasn't done. I'm speaking.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. But I feel like the information should be updated from the time that you did it up until 2023. Now I'm
We
finished.
will. Well, thank you.
Whatever you want to say, Alvin,
some-
you can say it.
I was just
Some
going
of
to
the,
say we're at 6:30. We do have.
Supposed to end. We normally give 15 minutes after 6:30 to have questions.
Right.
So
Reggie did have his hand up. Reggie, did you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to ask David. Dave, where are you going tomorrow? To the recovery luncheon, or are you to come to our recovery rally?
I won't be there. I was asked to speak at the recovery rally. Dora asked me to speak. I'm in Detroit. I'm about to do a presentation in less than 30 seconds, and then I'm speaking tomorrow at a Recovery Month event, and I'm dancing on Saturday. So no, I won't be there. But I did buy a ticket to the luncheon, and so I offered to give it away to anybody who didn't have a ticket who wanted to go. I want to comment real quickly that the comments are well noted. I told you that the one slide was dated, but there are several articles that I sent you that were attached that were 2019, 2021 data. Some of the data specific to COVID, which just happened a few years ago. I'm trained as a researcher and a presenter. I know how to use data. I told you in that very first slide, the one with the arrows, I told you that it was dated and anybody could use that against that presentation. But I'm almost certain that those numbers are still basically the same in 2023. I said that as well. So that's what I'm based on my experience. That's what my experience says. I know that it hasn't changed. I know that white people access treatment at a rate greater than black people. I know that black people access treatment several years later than white people. Just those 2 points alone means to me that if you serve in a population of folk who are African American, you need some special kind of training, I believe. You need to be able to teach them how to take pride in their history and their culture, to raise their esteem, and use that esteem to avoid using drugs and other self-destructive behaviors.
And with me being a person with boots on the ground on a daily basis, every week, every month, I can only testify to the fact what David just said. The numbers have only increased with what he's testifying to. Yeah.
And I mean, there's no disputing the disparities, that health disparities. They got a whole department at Morehouse School of Medicine to focus solely on health disparities. We have data that black people don't access medical care at the same rate as white people.
Facts.
The mortality rate for babies born to Black mothers is almost 40 times higher than it is babies born to white mothers. I don't need no recent data to know that. I know that's the same, it's been the same for the 50 years that I've been on this earth. Some things never change. I also do too understand how some people, and I told you, I pointed out in the presentation, there are some people who don't subscribe to this concept. They don't believe in this, and that's cool. We get pushback all the time, but this ain't about whether or not you believe in it. It's about, do you believe that the more pathways we have, the greater the number of people who achieve and sustain long-term recovery. That's part of what we are responsible for as a carer, I think anyway, right? We're about trying to make it as easy for as many people as possible to achieve and sustain long-term recovery. Adding additional pathways, adding additional pathways is one of the ways that we help increase the number of people who achieve and sustain long-term recovery. So I'm well over time. I do want to thank you all for being so patient, and thank you for the comments. And I'll promise you that Elvin will be able to email you the presentation with your certificate. And I want to get you come and get your culture presentation that we did at the very first state-funded recovery community organization ever. I want to get you the information that took place at that event, just for some historical stuff. You'll be able to look at it and say, wow, maybe we can do that again.
David, if you want to send me anything that I can send to people in the email, where they get their certificate, let me know, and I'll make sure that it gets attached.
Thank you.
And there were some links it were called pre-assignments in the email that you got when you signed up for this, if you want to go back and look at those as well. David, thank you. This was a lively discussion here, and I appreciate you bringing up some issues that people had opinions about.
You're welcome. If I could just say one last thing, part of the goal too of the presentation was to motivate people to see if we can get you excited about being a part of creating an Afrocentric recovery coach cadre. So if that's something you think you might be interested in, George's going to share with you my email and my phone number. Feel free to reach out to me and say, yo, David, this is something I think I might be interested in, or at least learning more about.
And keep an eye out for that. It will be coming sometime next week, your certificate and your email. If our recording of this has been uploaded by then, you'll get a link to that as well. I'm going to stop the recording now.